independently prosecute cases. And that would mean not only provision of infrastructure and funding for them to be fully functional, but also it will mean training in crime prosecution per se. So what we want is to ensure that there is independence for people to be able to perform their tasks without interference from the executive. And reducing the powers of the executive in this regard is very important.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ayarga, would you like to comment, or it's all right with you if I skip you? Because you said you didn't know about the existence of this plan.
Come again?
About the National Anti-Corruption Plan. Do you want to comment on it? How you would implement it?
I didn't hear you very well.
There exists a National Anti-Corruption Plan. It seems to be stuck between the executive and the legislature. What would be your commitment towards implementing this plan?
I think that from the word go, many of our regulations and our constitutions need to be reviewed when it comes to some particular aspect. I know that Shrag and Yoko, when given the necessary powers, they can work beyond others, anti-corrupt policies that will be issued to be able to change reforms and legislative reforms and attitudinal change. In addition, if we establish a special unit to keep an eye on government appointees, I believe top officials and others known sources of corruption similar to Armiao and us will work better for us than the public sector alone. Thank you.
So, to Nana Akufo-Addo, please. NPP.
Thank you very much, Madam. The commitment of our party and ourselves to the implementation of the National Anti-Corruption Plan is unequivocal. We have one modification that we would like to bring to the plan. The plan was led in its making by Shrag, and our view is that the remit of Shrag is far too broad for it to be the most effective means of dealing with corruption. We believe that the creation of an anti-corruption agency specifically dedicated to that is a critical step that we have to take. Secondly, there can be little question that there is a need for the Attorney General to delegate his power to this anti-corruption agency, to give it the opportunity directly to prosecute where it thinks prosecution is necessary. And we would do it. We don't think that there's any particular need for the separation, because at the end of the day, that's not the issue. The Freedom of Information Act had a 60-day period.
Thank you very much. Now to the NDC.
Thank you very much. The National Anti-Corruption Plan, Cabinet endorsed it. I was in the Cabinet meeting that discussed it, and we think it's a good plan. It's going to strengthen the fight against corruption in this country. The major plank in this plan is strengthening the anti-corruption agencies, and I think that that is at the core of our fight against corruption. Apart from public collaboration with the anti-corruption agencies and the security agencies, I think the next major issue to do with fight against corruption is the resourcing of the anti-corruption agencies. We've started to do this by increasing the funding to IOCO, and I think that also increasing the funding to TRAJ. I don't think TRAJ has a problem with its remit and its mandate. TRAJ's problem is under-resourcing in the face of competitive fights for resources for healthcare and education. As president, I'm committed to increasing the funding of TRAJ and making TRAJ have stronger teeth to be able to go after corrupt officials.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, we are still talking about governance, and I want us to talk about decentralized governance for a moment. The process of decentralization in our country hasn't gone as far as desired. You take a pensioner, for instance, still has to travel to Accra for his benefits. There are many across the country who still have to come to Accra for very basic and simple things. Here's the question. What strategies would you use to advance the decentralization agenda in your tenure? Mr. Ayarga of the PNC, I will start with you.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
What strategies would you use to advance the decentralization agenda in your tenure?
Thank you. The last IEA debate, I made mention of decentralizing the system of government in Ghana. Many did not understand what I was talking about. If you take Ghana into consideration, you will realize that everything is based in Accra here. Government contracts, government offices, businesses, and many other things. Even when companies come to Africa or Ghana to establish, they are fitted and sited in Accra. Now, you realize we have 10 regions in Ghana. We have the Ashanti region and many other regions. In the northern part of Ghana, we have vast land and we have cheap labor. Now, if we do not decentralize the system by, first of all, encouraging investors to make good use of land and labor in other regions, secondly, to make good use of available resources or opportunities that are in other regions that we don't have in Accra. Thirdly, we need to decentralize the system so that the movement of labor from the south, from the north to the south, will be cut off. Take Accra, for instance. Early mornings when people have to go to work, the whole place is congested. People drive 3 hours to their offices. If we are able to decentralize the system, then we will have a way of having jobs created in many of the regions that we have. For instance, we can move the iron rod company to be in Bolga. We take cement to be in Tamale. We take the plastic companies to be in Ashanti region. In that way, when we decentralize the system and decentralize all the activities of operation, it will now make the economy strengthen and have so much jobs for people across borders. It will stop the movement of young people from the north to the south. It will breach the poverty and also breach the sadder game that the NDC is putting up. I think that more, institutions have to be created to make sure that decentralization works. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nanado, the question is how? What strategies would you use to advance the decentralization agenda in your tenure?
Thank you very much, Kojo. Yet another very important question for the future of our country. My understanding about decentralization is that we're talking about the devolution of power. We're talking about moving out of the center here in Accra, the institutions that can best be dealt with at the local and the district level. Let me give you an example. Education and health are matters that are best addressed at the local level. We want to give a situation whereby our district assemblies have the capacity to control the educational institutions in their areas, as well as the health institutions in their areas. That is the concept of the devolution, that power is at the local level for them to be able to handle critical local issues. So the whole process of enhancing the capacity of the district assemblies, both in terms of the quality of the people who are working there and their own remit, is critical to the process of devolution and of decentralization. So that would be the first. Recognizing that it is difficult for anybody to say who has power to give it up easily, but that those of us who are at the center, God willing, if we have the opportunity, will recognize that the development of our country requires this process of devolution, and that therefore it is in the interest of our country to move the consideration of some of these basic fundamental issues for treatment at the local level, at the district level. That will be a very, very critical part of the strategy that we're going to have for decentralization and devolution. Clearly, the process of also giving the district assemblies the wherewithal in terms of the quality of people who are there is also going to be extremely important. I am for using the facilities of the local government school here in a much more dramatic and rapid manner than we have seen so far, to be able to turn out the people that can man our district assembly administrations and thereby take ownership of these critical institutions that we need to have in our education as well as in our health structure. So you have a combination of, first of all, the determination, the commitment to the decentralization process. I think that is, to a large extent, is what has been lacking. Once people speak of decentralization when they're in office, when they're in opposition, but when they get into office and they recognize that they're going to have to cede their power, they tend to then become slow and shuffle their feet. So we have to have the commitment, and then we have to have the recognition that we need to do a great deal to enhance the capability of the local government institutions that we have at the moment to be able to handle the issues of decentralization.
Thank you. Mr. President, the question is how? What strategies would you use?
Often the question is a bit awkward for me because what will you do? I am doing already. I've been chairman of the Decentralization Oversight Committee over the last 4 years, and we've done phenomenal. I disagree with you when you say we haven't achieved much. We have. Decentralization has 3 steps. It's got political, it's got administrative, it's got financial. We've done much with political. Indeed, other countries have come to study our district assemblies concept. And so we've made phenomenal progress with that. The districts are taking decisions of their own on what they want to do, what their development projects is. And so they've been empowered enough to be able to do so. Administrative, we had a problem of transferring the staff of the civil service to the local government service, which by God's grace we have achieved. It was a very difficult process. We had to educate the workers because of the transfer from civil service to local government service. They were scared about what was going to happen to them. Last year, we had a symbolic transfer of the staff. The head of civil service handed over the staff to the local government service. We're recruiting additional 2,600 staff to service the new districts that we have created. Then you have financial. Financial is where you empower the districts with the resources to be able to determine what they want to do themselves, hire their own staff, pay them themselves, rather than have it done at the center. Currently, we have a centralized payroll, which is at the Accountant General's Department. And for the first time, what we did was we introduced composite budgeting, because composite budgeting is what takes care of equipping the district assemblies to be able to manage their own finances. One of the things we realized was the education sector and the health sector, which are 2 critical sectors that must be in the decentralized departments, were taken out by the previous administration. We have put them back in. And that is why teachers and nurses and other people would eventually have their payments made at the district level, and it would be easy to know if a teacher is at post or he's not at post, because the controller and accountant general sits here, the head of the Ghana Education sits here. If a teacher doesn't go to school, they don't know it. But at the district level, the district chief executive is more likely to know if a teacher is not coming to school or a nurse is not at post than the current system that we have. So we are doing it already. One of the things we're doing is to increase performance by using the District Development Fund. Based on the performance of the district assembly, you get more of the DDF financing. So this is to encourage them to increase their performance. Then aside from that, we have the urban development grants. Based on the performance of the urban metropolitan assemblies, we give them more grants. But there are a few outstanding things to do with the politics of it. Election of DCEs. I think that we need to trust our people that they can make the right choices for themselves. Like Nanado said, it is tempting to keep a control of the DCEs when you're in government. And I remember when his government was coming, they said they were going to do election of DCEs, they didn't. I am committed to moving that step. It's in the Constitutional Review Committee's report, and I will enforce it.
Thank you. Dr. Sakara.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that your question is on strategy, because the individual actions will virtually be the same. The question is the strategy. And you don't kill a snake by hitting it a little bit from the tail all the way to the head. You hit it on the head. The reason decentralization has taken so long is because simply central government does not want to give up the power. So it has a long, drawn-out process of how we relinquish it bit by bit, etc. Our strategy will be fundamentally different. First, we will have the strongest public sector reform that you have seen that will remove a chunk of the capacity at the national level and put it at the district level. But before that, we will rethink the entire decentralization process, because right now we have long gone past the point at which decentralization will be efficient with 213 districts. What was the purpose of decentralization in the first place? It was to be a focal point for government. What we now have is creation of districts for political gerrymandering. This confusion between constituencies and districts needs to be removed once and for all. And we need to re-aggregate districts to a size that's economic enough for you to have a tax base to make them viable. That will reduce the numbers and ensure also that when we allocate personnel to that level, there will be insufficient quantity because the capacity already exists. It's a matter of reallocation. The second thing is the political decentralization, which needs to be effected immediately. This will ensure that district chief executives who are elected over 3 to 4 constituencies can obviously not be the same caliber as members of parliament because they will have a much bigger mandate. And these are the people you will entrust the local government to. And you will empower the communities to be able to engage with them, keep track of the development projects that are supposed to happen, and when they don't happen, use the mechanisms at their disposal to give the right information for action to be taken. What we must know ultimately is that decentralization is a reallocation of resources so that everybody gets their fair share. This is the primary purpose, and to bring development within the power of the communities themselves. We need a strategy that refocuses on the purpose and brings us back from where we are now to where we need to be. And I must say that my two colleagues in the NDC and MPP have had more than enough time to do it. So give CPP a chance to do it. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for the strategies that you have shared with us. We're going to take a break at this time. We'll be back in 10 minutes for the second round. Mr. Aga, you have a rebuttal? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Have we finished one round?
No, it's left. I think that let's go back to the powers. The last time I made mention of separating economic power from political power. With regards to decentralization, I believe if government or the nation is able to review our constitution to separate economic power from political power, the decentralization will be more effective in all the sectors of this country. Because you realize that all the powers of government take controls of every situation in every district. Now, it is government who decide which particular constituency must be developed or not. But when we decentralize and change and move political power from economic power, now economists and economic planners will now have a long-term development policy or plan for each district, irrespective of which political power or party is in power. We will then know that if Boku is supposed to be developed for the next 20 years, and this is the plan, no matter which government is in power, we are not worried. Funds will be allocated to each district, and district executives will be elected among themselves, not appointed by government, where the DCE gives orders to the assemblymen and to other executives that are elected by the committee of the district. Now you see there are contradictions, because if your government is not in power, that will mean that that particular district will not be developed the way we want it. But if we separate them, whether the NDC government is in power or the MPP government is in power, development process will continue. Development process.
Go ahead, sir.
I need 10 seconds to finish up.
Go ahead, finish up, sir.
The NDC and the MPP has failed, so they are worried that we want to take the power from them. So, development process will continue without fear or favor. Then nobody will be afraid of losing his job. Nobody thinks that the NDC is in power, so if I do not perform and NDC comes, they will take me out of government.
Okay.
Now, thank you.
Your time is up. I thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your strategies. We're going to take a break at this moment. We'll return in 10 minutes for the second round. Thank you.
Now I hand over to our moderators for tonight's debate.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me more clearly now. All right, thank you. And welcome to our distinguished candidates. We now move to the second part of our discussions, and this time we are focusing on our natural resources. And the question is this, beginning with CPP. What would you do as president to ensure that Ghana gets the best deal from its gas resources?
First and foremost, we must recognize that the resolution on permanent sovereignty over national wealth and resources passed by the United Nations in 1962 gives every nation control over its resources. However, in the kind of contracts that we have been writing with foreign investors, we have not asserted this claim to its fullest. It appears as if we are rather borrowing those natural resources. I believe that we must assert our ownership over those resources. And we will do this first by ensuring that we use the existing opportunity of the oil income to gather sufficient capital resources to have very different kinds of contracts in the subsequent oil fields that we explore. Those will focus on ensuring that we build the technical capacity, the knowledge gap, we bridge it to be able to exploit our resources fully onshore. It will also ensure that we process that oil onshore with all the ancillary industries associated with it. We will also ensure that the local content law, which has not yet been passed, is passed. In fact, the petroleum and exploration and petroleum law that governs the industry is still also not passed. These are measures that we would implement with a sense of urgency, because you cannot be exploring an industry without the framework to govern that industry. Setting up the Petroleum Commission as an institution without the instruments for it to carry out its duties and functions is not sufficient. And I believe that we would ensure the subsequent bills are passed quickly. We also need to better audit the costs of exploration to ensure that we know the revenue that is coming in from it, right at source, to be able to determine whether or not we are getting our fair share. We need to improve the monitoring of output by ensuring that our own people are put in place with mechanisms that are effective to measure those outputs. We need to view that natural resource as an inheritance of the future generation yet unborn, and manage it with the responsibility that a responsible government should have to ensure that our own resources benefit our own people. We need also to improve the capacity of our local entrepreneurs to engage.
Thank you very much. We now move on to PNC. Mr. Yarga. Excuse me, can you turn on your mic?
The recent discovery of oil and gas in commercial quantities was greeted with joy and enthusiasm by Ghanaians, hoping that their living condition will change. Unfortunately, 3 years after oil production, nothing has changed. This is because the production agreement entered into with the oil companies does not favor Ghana and Ghanaians. Under the agreement, Ghana received only 13% of oil produced, and out of this 13%, 3 goes to 2 individuals, leaving the nation with just 10. This is robbery, corruption. This is outrageous and unacceptable. When I become the president, I will review all agreement in respect of oil production to favor Ghanaians. Let nobody tell me that it cannot be done. President Rawlings reviewed the VALCO agreement to favor Ghanaians in 1980s. I will draw inspiration and experience from him and review all agreements on oil production to favor Ghanaians. I will also expand the exploration of oil and gas to cover other coastal areas and the Baltic bays with discoveries of oil that have been made. The aim of this expansion program is to increase production of oil and gas to generate more revenue. I will also increase local businesses and ensure that communities in the catchment areas benefit more from the oil find. Industries and agriculture will also be given a boost from the oil production. The level of